hours later.
Let me take a selfie. Oh no!
Hello and welcome to this edition of Talk Vietnam. Now, with the previous clip, try to imagine how chaotic life would be without internet. I mean, no more emails, no more Google, no more Facebook, and no more chatting with friends. And of course, no online shopping and no cyber gaming for many. Life would be very different for many of us. Now, 2017 this year actually marks 20 years since the internet came into Vietnam. In this edition of Talk Vietnam, we'll talk about some of the changes that the internet has brought to the country and also how it is going to shape the country in the next 20 years. To join us today to discuss this issue, we have with us Professor Dr. Phạm Quang Minh. He is the president of the University of Social Sciences and Humanities under the Vietnam National University in Hanoi. He's also the chairman of the academic board of the Vietnam Program for Internet and Society, known as a VPIS. Our second guest is Dennis Brunetti. He is the president of Ericsson in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. Thank you both for joining us here today.
Pleasure. Thank
Now,
you.
our talk today obviously is going to be about the internet and the incredible impacts that it has had on Vietnam. So my first question is probably, how do you think our world would be, our life would be here in Vietnam without the advent of the internet?
If we do not have an internet, I think the previous life come back with, for example, in the morning, opening our box, postal box, and receive the envelope with the letters like before. Nowadays, the first thing you do in your days is to open your computer or your smartphone and read your letters. The other thing is, you have to go to buy something, for example, in the shop, in the supermarket. Nowadays, you can sit at home comfortably and order without internet. The people are maybe very boring. Maybe they are very unhappy. Yeah, some people from our research, for example, they cannot live without internet within 72 hours.
It seems like the internet has become a little bit of a necessity and to some even a surviving factor.
Oh yes, I think the internet now is like the air we breathe, very much. And I think when you take away the internet, I see some of my friends back in Melbourne, even in Australia, when they decide they want to take the iPhone or the iPad or whatever away from their child, just for an hour maybe, so they can do something else or study or whatever, and it's almost like they're suffocating. It's almost like they're needing to gasp for air. So I think the internet has become the air we breathe, and then with the internet and mobile broadband and fixed broadband, we've basically connected not only people, but now we're starting to connect things. And we're going to take all this for granted in another 10 years from now. So I think reflecting back, what would life have been like without the internet? Completely different.
Yes.
We probably wouldn't miss it because we wouldn't know any different or any better, but certainly now that we're used to it, we can never live without it.
Vietnam first connected to the Global Information Network via the internet on November 19, 1997. In 1991, Professor Rob Hurl from the Australian National University and Chen Ba Thai from the Hanoi Institute of Information Technology conducted an experiment to connect computers in Australia and Vietnam via a telephone line. In 1992, for the first time, people in Vietnam could send emails abroad with the .au tag. In 1994, the Hanoi Institute of Information Technology, through the support of the company Netnam, became the first internet service provider in Vietnam, with the email service under the .vn domain name. In 1997, other services were provided by Netnam as the internet became officially authorized to operate in Vietnam. By 2017, Vietnam has become one of the fastest growing internet and internet application users in the world and the leading country in the Southeast Asian region in terms of the number of national domain names.
Một quốc gia mà không được kết nối về phương tiện thông tin, đặc biệt là thông tin về khoa học và công nghệ thì quốc gia là không có cơ hội để vươn lên. Cái diện mạo mà Việt Nam có ngày hôm nay đó, đấy chính là kết nối với internet.
Talking about the life before internet, though, we got a little bit nostalgic there of the days before the internet. I know you, Dennis, came to Vietnam in those days, exactly a year before the internet actually came in 1996. What was life like back then in Vietnam?
Oh, I mean, very different. Back in those days, I mean, you had to be in the office if you were working. Now you can work from anywhere. I mean, you can be in any coffee shop, working remotely, business. There's no business now that can't be open 24/7 because you've got access to customers anytime, anywhere. People are selling things online, buying things online. So the way we work, the way we get married, the way we socialise, the way we interact, everything, the way we look for things to buy and the Google map, the way we navigate around a particular city, the way we book movie tickets, the way we book airline tickets, everything we buy, everything we do is impacted in a favourable way by the internet. So it's an extremely powerful part of our lives.
Yes. What were some of the memories of those days for you coming to Vietnam? That was your first time to the country.
Yes, I'd been working with the Vietnam market since '94, actually, a couple of years before I first came. So I had my preconceived ideas, and in Australia it was very easy to have a lot of preconceived ideas at that time before your first visit. And I just loved Vietnam. The greatest memory I had at the time was the people being very simple, being very caring, very loving, and very open and friendly towards foreigners. And I felt extremely welcome in Vietnam from that first day, and it's never changed, that feeling. And the way people adopt new things since then, it doesn't matter how old you are. I think all generations in Vietnam particularly, they just adopt new technology and new trends and fashions and styles in every sense. And the internet is no different. I think I see a lot of older people, much older people, using the internet as though they were born with it.
Yeah.
If we may now talk a little bit about those first years, what were some of the first major changes that the internet brought to Vietnam, would you think?
I think that's maybe in the first year for the people here in Vietnam, I think it's tremendous news because Vietnam actually was very isolated country. because during the Cold War, Vietnam was very isolated. There was not so much connection between Vietnam and other countries. So now with the internet and with the end of the Cold War, the world became more open for the people. There was big chance, and the Vietnamese people, I think, because facing with the new situation, they have on the one side, some people were shocked, of course, yeah, because of the maybe security reason. But on the other side, the majority of the people was very welcome such kind of new thing. And for Vietnam, I think, because the majority of the Vietnamese people, population, 2/3 of them were born after the Vietnam War.
That's true.
And that's why they can adapt very quickly to the new situation. For many Vietnamese, it's the new chapter in their life. Yeah? Because before internet and after internet, there is big change. And this change, brought, I think, more advantage for them.
Yeah, I think it was the connections and the knowledge. Because that was the first thing I saw as well, was that people connected more, both nationally and internationally, but also gained knowledge. They were hungry for knowledge, so they were able to get access to information that wasn't available, readily available at least earlier. And that went both ways.
Yes.
So people from around the world also got access
found
to
out
Vietnam.
more about Vietnam.
And understood the beauty of Vietnam and the beauty of its people and the beauty of its culture. And that's what's brought many people here actually over the years.
That's true.
Yeah, we receive nowadays around 8 million tourists from outside. Actually before, to have 1 million or 2 million was very difficult. But nowadays, 8 million is so normal for Vietnamese, a country.
Hồi tiểu học thì em hay có trò viết thư cho ông bà ngoại ở quê, còn bây giờ thì em chỉ cần gọi điện cho ông bà qua mess là nhìn thấy mặt rồi. Đấy thì nó tiện lợi hơn rất nhiều. Rồi bây giờ thì mấy cái dịch vụ em có thể đi chuyển khoản bằng internet banking nó cũng rất tiện.
Chúng ta có thể kết nối với hàng tỷ người trên thế giới để có thể bán được cái rau trồng trong cái vườn rau nhà mình và có thể lên đĩa ở tại Tokyo trong một cái bữa ăn của gia đình trong vòng 24 tiếng.
Mình hồi trước là mình toàn đọc sách thôi ấy. Mình không ngờ là internet có nhiều sách như vậy, và không có kho giải trí nữa. Với cả bao nhiêu mạng xã hội mình có thể kết bạn với rất nhiều người ở khắp nơi trên thế giới.
Có lẽ là internet là cái môi trường học hỏi lớn nhất, chứ không phải các trường phổ thông và đại học nữa.
Internet ra đời và kéo theo nhiều cái hình thức như mạng xã hội thì cũng giúp ích nhiều cho công việc, ví dụ như hình thức livestream trên mạng xã hội.
Internet chính là tương lai của thế giới 20 năm tới.
Dennis, you mentioned the 2000. Was that probably the point where the internet boom happened here in Vietnam?
Yeah, I don't think you can pick one specific inflection point. Just like with everything, it's a journey, and it's a continuous journey at that. And we're still on that journey, by the way, because you've got some 50+ million internet users now in Vietnam, which, by the way, it's the 17th country now globally that's hit 50 million internet users. Who would have thought that 20 years ago?
Yes.
So Vietnam is now in the top 17, and Facebook-wise, top 10 Facebook users in the world. But yeah, I think in terms of picking a date, difficult to do, but I would say that the exponential growth really started to accelerate after 2000. And that's clear. I mean, you can see that in most of the reports and the data. And it was that young population, because the median age is roughly, 27?
Yes.
And a lot of people that were quite young at the time saw the benefits of the internet perhaps sooner than most others. And then it started to get adopted at high school and at universities. And it just got absorbed into every aspect of people's lives. It was unbelievable. And it was great to watch it from where I was sitting, actually, because at the time, I mean, we had access to it in Australia and in Sweden, where my company, Ericsson, is from. You know, originally we're headquartered in Stockholm, and Sweden is 9 million people, or nearly 10 these days. So about 10% of the Vietnamese population. And the uptake there of mobile telephony, mobile broadband, and the internet was quite astronomical, along with Australia, where I was originally born. So both Australia and Sweden. And when you look at what happened in Vietnam, it happened a bit later, but that growth was just as fast, just to a larger scale. Not 9 million people, not 20 million people, but rather nearly 90 or over 90 million people
over
now.
90 million, yeah.
So the scale here is just very, very different and
Yes.
much bigger. And that's what makes it more significant, and you can sense and feel the impact of the internet. I think you can have a Wi-Fi internet connection in most cafes and
Yeah.
restaurants and bars in Vietnam, even more so than you would in most developed countries today.
That's true.
It was also the 3G, so
Yes.
what you had basically from '93, Ericsson was building the first networks with Vinaphone and Mobifone, and that basically brought GSM 2G to Vietnam. From '93, that was being built out. And then after 2000, certainly it was still probably GPRS and Edge was starting to kick in, so faster data speeds that enabled mobile internet.
Yes.
But still, most of the internet at the time was on a fixed computer. Basically from 2009 onwards, that's when you saw the mobile broadband really kick in and the internet. So I think now you've got 53 million users roughly of the internet, but about 43, 44 million are doing it over the mobile broadband connection.
That's true.
And about 9 million on the fixed. And so I think Vietnam has leapfrogged many countries.
What were some of the other kind of highlights, would you say?
The number one is the number of users was increasing. Yeah. Nowadays, according to the different statistics, Vietnam belongs to the top country, having the biggest number of users, more than a half of population of Vietnam. The number second is user of mobile phone, of a smartphone. It's also very impressive statistic. Each Vietnamese nowadays use more than one smartphone. I think 1.3 or 1.4 smartphone. Number three, I think it's internet became so popular. For example, for the government, the e-government is very popular. So it makes the management more transparent,
Yes.
more accountable. Yeah? It saves the time. Also, it prevents from such kind of problem like corruption. The other thing for economic development, I think, is also very important, is the so-called e-commerce. The last point I think is important is for the country, we can measure the level of integration of the country. For example, how many computer connected with the internet?
Yes.
Yeah. How many people use the internet? So this number in Vietnam, in comparison to the other country, is increasing by the time. So it is very important measure to show that Vietnam nowadays has been changing dramatically from isolated country to an integrated country.
Yes.
Hồi đấy em thấy nó phiền lắm.
Vui ạ, vui.
Rất là sung sướng ạ.
Cực kỳ ngỡ ngàng.
Có cuộc sống tình cảm.
Em lên để xem các cái hoạt hình thôi.
Để liên lạc với người thân.
Để vào tra cứu những thông tin liên quan đến đời sống hàng ngày.
With the advance of technology and the use of technology in order to start up businesses, I think the economy has become even more open to be inclusive of everyone. I mean, anyone who uses an internet, who has the ability, can be able to start up a business.
That's right. In fact, studies show that for every 1,000 new internet connections, 80 new jobs are created in a society. So the internet is a friend of employment. Many people often mistakenly assume that while the internet and technology may rob people of jobs, but actually it creates new jobs. People can connect through one internet portal to many different people, and companies can do that. So I think with small, medium, large enterprises all adopting the internet, you will see an explosion of employment opportunities. So that's a key measure. And the other thing also is GDP growth. Typically, with every roughly 10% increase in internet penetration, you get nearly 1% GDP growth. So it helps actually develop the country. But the key question, and this is important, I think from a fourth industrial revolution perspective, it's important to make sure that as you get GDP growth, economic growth, that you also get median wage growth and employment opportunities generated so that you get an inclusive economic growth. I understand the government's putting a lot of focus now on ensuring that educational institutions, both public and private, work together with industry and work together with the government in ensuring that the next wave, the next generation of employment opportunities will be there, and people will be trained up for those proactively in advance, because that's the key as well. I think this change will happen now even quicker. The first, second, third generations happened over time.
Yes.
The fourth generation industrial revolution is going to happen a lot faster. So it's all about planning now and being ready. So I think that really is a key question for the Vietnamese government, and I think for most governments around the world, actually.
Exactly. So now we prepared a little video for you to see, you know, this kind of outreach of the internet here in the country.
Tôi là một cái người mà các bạn trẻ đến với tôi, họ phong cho tôi là trẻ mãi không già. Người ta gọi là cụ vòng phi tin. Người ta gọi là tuổi của tôi, tuổi thực là gần 100, nhưng mà tuổi tâm hồn là có 20. Anh ấy là ông ghê lắm, đứng gần là ông đuổi đi đàn bà, bẩn đi ra chỗ khác. Đàn bà là bẩn lắm, sao thấy bố đọc được, thấy anh đọc được, thấy người khác đọc được, mà mình nhìn với giấy là không đọc được thì tức quá. Tôi thích vẽ, tôi thích viết, thế cho nên là tôi tức với cái thân phận của tôi. Còn ra biết cái gì là tôi mong rằng tôi sẽ làm được cái que nào, cái que chở lửa nó có cục than ở đầu là vẽ nền nhà. Nhưng mà viết thì khó hơn vậy. Vẽ một ngày đến 10 ngày là có thể đạt được một cái hướng nào. Nhưng mà viết thì phải 10 năm mới đạt được cái mình muốn làm. Kẻ thù lớn nhất của đời người là như vậy. Trong cái gì hiểu biết gọi là cái kiến thức của con người là nó triệu lần, mà tôi mới biết có một, cho nên là có lẽ tôi sống 100 năm nữa tôi vẫn còn khát khao biết thêm được cái gì là tôi biết cái ấy có thế.
Wow.
So that was the very inspiring story of Mrs. Leti, who is a 97-year-old who's not only savvy on the internet, but has used the internet in order to learn something that she wasn't able to do earlier. What did you think about that story?
I think surprisingly. The question is, where does she get the information? Where does she got the knowledge to write a book? And my answer is maybe from the internet, right? Internet became a world for her to explore, surprisingly.
And also she had this great desire and determination to learn, and the internet became, is still her best friend.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. And I think she's also probably the internet's best friend, because I think the internet depends on that type of interaction. It's a two-way engagement.
Yes.
And I think what it really also shows is that the internet is a great equalizer, because it doesn't matter what language you speak, where you're from, how old you are, how educated you are, where you come from. The internet is available to everyone. It's a window. It's an opportunity for everyone to look through and work through and gain something from. So you can actually put content into it, you can take content out of it. And I think it's important to understand that it is a great way of actually giving everyone equal opportunity.
Vietnam Internet Forum 2017, or VIF17, the very first event of its kind, took place in Hanoi on November the 27th and 28th, under the theme Digital for Good, VIF 17 sought to provide a platform for exchanging views on how the internet can foster development in ways that are sustainable and inclusive, which means providing access to information and opportunities for all.
The theme we chose in collaboration with our partners, of course, with the Ministry of Information and Communications, some universities and others, to look at it from a positive aspect. It's so easy to feel that you are being threatened by accessibility and internet, but we want to turn it around and see how the internet as such can be used for sustainable and positive development.
Overall, the participants at the event shared an optimistic view on internet development in Vietnam, especially about the affordability of the data, the prospective future of smart cities initiatives, and new fertile grounds for tech startups.
It used to be very expensive. Now the costs of data have become so affordable, which I think is a testament to how the government has really pushed for access to become decentralized. I think it's also great to see how a lot of people are using the internet to grow very small businesses, to advertise, a local coffee shop, people making dresses, people doing little civic projects.
It's very exciting to see how Vietnam is actually pushing a lot of the e-government agenda, including the smart cities. Ho Chi Minh has, I understood, recently launched its smart city initiative and has begun with a number of areas where it looks to invest in others. So we very much look forward to seeing how Ho Chi Minh succeeds, but also how information is shared across some of the other cities in Vietnam.
VIF 17 brought together not only experts from international organizations, but also enterprises from many countries looking for opportunities in Vietnam. One of them is the Stockholm-based startup called KRY, a pioneering digital healthcare service provider that allows people in remote areas to get medical advice through on-demand video consultation.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time that will be here in Vietnam as well. Then you need the connectivity part of it. You have a rather good connectivity here in Hanoi, but not in all regions. I think the important part with KRI and our type of solution is that it brings equal access to everyone. And then you also need to have equal access when it comes to connectivity and internet access.
Coming back to Vietnam, it's very exciting to see how much opportunity there is, but also how much great talent there is in Vietnam. Planet 9 as a social impact incubator will be working both in New York and Vietnam. And the exciting thing about Vietnam is we'll be making sure that we have a great development team here in Vietnam that could build great tech startups with us in conjunction to working with New York.
It is time to move ahead. Leave no one offline.
Inspired by the annual Stockholm Internet Forum in Sweden, VIF 17 was co-hosted by the Embassy of Sweden in Vietnam and the Ministry of Information and Communications. The organizers of VIF 17 hope to make the forum an annual platform where the relevant stakeholders in the society come together to discuss the Internet's contribution to an open, sustainable and innovative society.
You are both speakers at the Vietnam Internet Forum 2017. What are some of the topics or new information to the event?
It will be biggest ever event in the internet in Vietnam because never before we have such kind of forum. There will be really a dialogue because for the first time, and to try to identify the problem of the internet here in Vietnam, and to look back, 20 years of the development and the way ahead. And especially important is how to use the strength of internet for economic development. I think it's the main point in the internet forum.
There are many questions floating around about the internet, and certainly the economic development aspect of it. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's the most important aspect. And everyone's talking about the fourth generation industrial revolution. I think the internet is the fuel. It's the fuel. It's the lifeblood of the fourth generation industrial revolution. Without the internet, you're not going to have... So any country that doesn't embrace the internet and the openness of the internet will fall behind. So clearly that will be a key message. And I applaud the Vietnamese government and I applaud the Swedish embassy for having the foresight, the vision, and in many ways the courage actually to bring this topic to the surface and have the discussion in an open forum.
So Dennis, you mentioned, your background in both Australia, which is where you grew up, and also Sweden, which is the country of your company. How is it like with the internet? We mentioned a little bit about how the internet was developing there, but when did it start for Sweden?
Yeah, so in the 90s as well, like most of the world, but Sweden was one of the early adopters actually, not only of the internet but also of the mobile telephony wave, and I mean, the uptake was huge and very quick. So now it's nearly 100% penetration when it comes to the internet. And in fact, it's not just the mobile broadband internet, but also fixed internet. So most people have got a fixed internet access at home.
Yes.
About 91, 92% actually. So they have internet access both via mobile and via the fixed network at home. And I think that really enables the Swedes to use the internet in a very creative way, innovative way. And there's a real startup culture in Sweden. And I think the mindset of that startup culture is certainly, I think, accelerated or enhanced by the internet. And I think after Silicon Valley, in fact, Sweden, or Stockholm specifically, has an extremely big proportion or large proportion of ICT startup companies emerging. Skype, for example, emerged. Spotify. Came out of Sweden. So that's one thing I noticed in Sweden. And then the e-government topic we talked about earlier, Professor. I think the government in Sweden embraced the internet very early compared to most other countries in the world. So their government became very efficient. And most enterprises in Sweden utilise the internet in very, very efficient ways as well. So the GDP is quite good in Sweden. The growth is reasonably good compared to the rest of Europe. And it's predominantly due to its embracing of the internet and its use of the internet in its operation.
At the first Southeast Asia Regional Conference of Psychology, which took place in Hanoi in early December 2017, a group of Vietnamese research fellows based in Singapore and the US presented for the first time their research on the effects of social media on Vietnamese youth. Accordingly, besides entertainment and education, online peer support is among the top benefits that social media brings to adolescents. An example of this is Beautiful Mind, one of the first online projects to promote mental well-being to the public.
I'm full of hatred. Can you please help? I used to be bullied as a child. Since then, whenever I'm stressed, I have dreams that I'm being beaten.
I'm the youngest in my family. My parents always compare me to my sister, which really kills my confidence. This has become a mental issue.
These emails to Beautiful Mind are from depression sufferers who are seeking help. With consultations from a team of psychologists and psychiatrists, after 2 years, the project has attracted 15,000 members, aged 15 to 24, and has received much positive feedback.
Tất cả những người mà bị bệnh tâm lý thì người ta thường không muốn gặp người khác nhiều, họ chỉ muốn giao tiếp qua mạng thì nó cảm thấy an toàn hơn và cái danh tính của họ, cái bí mật của họ cũng không bị lộ ra.
However, aside from its benefits, social media can also have negative impacts on Vietnamese adolescents, such as cyberbullying and decreased interaction with relatives and friends.
Trong một bài báo cáo khoa học của bọn mình có tìm hiểu về mạng xã hội, 80% số bạn được gửi trả lời thì nói là họ dành nhiều thời gian hơn cho mạng xã hội mà quên đi những thời gian dành cho những người thân khác.
40,8% là số người tham gia cái nghiên cứu của mình là thừa nhận là họ đã bị bắt nạt qua mạng. Các bạn không muốn tiết lộ hoặc vì một lý do nào đấy, ví dụ như là sợ bị đánh giá là yếu đuối.
According to psychologists, parents and schools play an important role in training young adults to be responsible internet users.
It's us, the parents, who would regulate the use of social media. I believe if they do understand the positive effects and how it could contribute better to their maturity, to their well-being, I'm sure it would be more of the advantage.
Chỉ cần gia đình có một cái định hướng đúng, ở nhà trường nữa, các thầy cô có những cái nhắc nhở kịp thời và chỉ dẫn đúng đắn
thì các bạn sẽ tìm thấy những cái trang mà mang lại rất là nhiều những kiến thức cũng như là trợ giúp các bạn trong những lúc bạn khó khăn.
The Vietnam Program for Internet and Society by the University of Social Sciences and Humanities announced that adolescents aged 13 to 24 account for 40% of Internet users in Vietnam. According to experts, it is high time for the youth to become fully aware of the risks of social media.
Let's talk about a different facet of the internet now. We've talked about the benefits. What now are some of the downsides of the internet?
Our program, the Vietnam Program for Internet and Society of the University of Social Sciences and Humanities, just organized a conference, international conference with the Lund University from Sweden on the topic of the so-called hate speech.
Yes.
And we realize it in both country and in also other country. It is very important topic that means that many people to use this internet for such kind of unconstructive way of dealing with internet. For example, they make such kind of wrong statements about someone in order to denounce the way of making business. They use also the fake news in order to claim someone and bring many people into very difficult situation.
There's cases around the world, of course, and I've known people on a personal level even, where you get suicide. I mean, you do get some people, actually, young people who are harassed potentially on the internet.
Cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying happens in a lot of countries. It happened in Australia a few years ago where, someone suicided because she was being bullied by people and there were photographs being put on the internet about her. And then, of course, you've got this massive reach. I mean, you put something out there and everyone sees it. So I think we all have a responsibility to help each other, to support each other, and to use the internet in ways that are constructive and mutually beneficial.
I think education must play an important role.
Yes.
And family. I think family here, because the main value of Vietnam country is family. Every story, every discussion comes firstly from the family. So I think the parents have also responsibility.
I do believe that Vietnam don't have as much to worry about maybe as they think they do. And this question that's been raised about the social and the responsible use of the social media is a question for all countries. I mean, it's the same concern I think that most parents have all around the world. But I wouldn't say that that concern should be higher in Vietnam versus any other country, not at all.
Now, we're celebrating a milestone here, 20 years since the internet came to Vietnam. In the next 20 years, where do you see the internet here in the country?
5G and IoT and cloud and artificial intelligence will basically change things even more exponentially than they have already. So, I mean, if you look back 20 years and think, wow, look at the change that's happened, the next 20 years, I can promise you, that change will be even more dramatic and greater than the last 20 years. And it'll be driverless cars, we talk about automated vehicles, but we also talk about remote surgery
Yes.
and mobile health and different types of education, remote education, smart metering, different type of smart grids energy-wise, and then of course more efficient use of energy. There's going to be a lot of things that will benefit society, not only from a convenience perspective, but also from a sustainability perspective.
I think if we can compare two periods of pre-internet and after internet, we see that the main point is the human. Human must be the most important.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that we should work with each other. I mean, Vietnam is a newcomer in this new digital age, I think so. Even we have a very big progress after 20 years of internet in Vietnam, but it does not mean that we can be satisfactory with what have been achieved here in Vietnam, because we are in the beginning of development. So that's why many people, young people, they are so excited about the technology, and that's why sometimes they forget responsibility. That's why I think the people here need the guideline from the government, the law also, and the instrument to protect them from the negative side.
Yes, well, thank you so much, you both, for coming here and sharing your stories, your knowledge on the internet development here in the country, and your hopes and for the future. We at Talk Vietnam can only hope that, along with the world, the internet here in Vietnam will also continue to develop to the best and for the benefit of the people, and most responsibly as well.
Yeah. Thank
you for joining us.
Thank you.
And that has also wrapped up this edition of Talk Vietnam, marking 20 years since the introduction of the internet here in the country. May the internet continue to grow here in the country, benefiting all people, and may all internet users out there find the best in their internet using experience and use it quite responsibly. Thank you very much for joining us, and until next time here on Talk Vietnam. Goodbye for now.